Hey there, I'm Margaret. 3 years ago, I couldn't get out of bed without wincing in pain. My mornings started with stiffness so severe that my husband Tom had to help me stand up. At 70, I thought this was just my new normal, that aching joints and limited mobility were simply part of getting older. My doctor called it age-related arthritis and handed me a prescription. But those pills upset my stomach and made me feel foggy. I remember sitting in my garden, the one I could barely tend anymore, and thinking, is this really it? Is this how I'll spend my golden years? Well, today I'm going to share how everything changed and how I got my life back using simple movements anyone can do, even if you think you're too old or too stiff to start. I still remember the day that changed everything. My granddaughter Emma was visiting, and she wanted me to get down on the floor to play with her new doll house. I had to tell her no. The look of disappointment on her face broke my heart. That night, I cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I made a decision. I refused to accept that chronic pain had to define the rest of my life. I'd been a high school physical education teacher for 30 years. Surely I could figure something out. So I started researching. Not just medical websites, but alternative approaches, gentle movement therapies, anything that might help seniors like me regain mobility without causing more pain. What I discovered surprised me. So many of us believe that when we're older and in pain, we should rest more. But often, that's exactly the opposite of what our bodies need. The right kind of gentle, consistent movement can actually be the key to reducing chronic pain, especially for those of us with arthritis or age-related joint issues. I'm not talking about high-intensity workouts or anything extreme. I'm talking about intentional, mindful stretches that respect where your body is right now. Before I share the stretches that changed everything for me, let's talk about why our bodies seem to betray us as we get older. Understanding this helped me approach my pain differently. As we age, several things happen naturally. Our joint fluid decreases, making movement less smooth. The cartilage that cushions our joints thins out. And perhaps most importantly, many of us become less active, which leads to muscle weakness around those vulnerable joints. When muscles weaken, they can't properly support our joints, putting extra stress on them. With every movement, it's a vicious cycle. Pain leads to less movement, which leads to weaker muscles, which creates more pain. For me, it was my knees and lower back that suffered most. Years of demonstrating sports techniques to teenagers had taken its toll, and now ordinary activities like gardening or walking to the mailbox had become painful challenges. What I didn't realize was that I was making it worse by avoiding movement. I was trying to protect myself, but I was actually accelerating my decline. My first breakthrough came with what I now call my morning mobilization. I realized that how I started my day set the tone for everything that followed. Instead of jumping, or rather, creaking, out of bed immediately, I began taking 5 minutes while still lying down to gently wake up my body. I'd start by simply pointing and flexing my feet, making small circles with my ankles. Then I'd slide my heel toward my bottom to bend one knee, then the other. The key was moving slowly and breathing deeply. No jerky movements, no pushing through pain. Just gentle reminders to my joints that movement was safe. Next came a gentle twist. Still lying on my back, I'd let my knees fall to one side while looking in the opposite direction, creating a soft spiral through my spine. After holding for a few breaths, I'd switch sides. What amazed me was how such simple movements, ones that didn't even require getting out of bed, could so dramatically reduce my morning stiffness. Within 2 weeks of doing this daily, I could get up without Tom's help. The improvement wasn't dramatic at first, but it was noticeable. And that gave me hope. Once I could get moving more comfortably in the morning, I developed a series of seated stretches I could do after breakfast. These became my second breakthrough. Using a sturdy chair with no wheels, I created a 10-minute routine that addressed my most problematic areas. I focused on my shoulders, hips, and spine, the areas that affect almost everything else we do. For my shoulders, I'd sit tall and simply bring one arm across my chest, gently pulling it closer with the opposite hand. Then I'd reach that same arm behind my head, between my shoulder blades, using my other hand to support my elbow. These stretches helped with everyday movements, like reaching for items in kitchen cabinets. For my spine, I'd sit toward the edge of the chair and place both hands on one knee, then gently rotate toward that side, using the chair back for support. This gentle spinal twist helped ease the stiffness in my lower back. But the real game changer was what I call the seated figure four. Sitting tall, I'd cross one ankle over the opposite knee, creating a figure four shape with my legs. Then, maintaining a straight back, I'd lean forward slightly until I felt a stretch in my hip. For someone who had trouble putting on socks and shoes, this stretch was revolutionary. The beauty of these chair stretches was that I could do them anywhere, at the kitchen table, watching TV, even when visiting my grandkids. They required no special equipment, just a stable chair and a few minutes of attention. After about a month of consistent practice, I noticed I could garden for 30 minutes without back pain. I could play with Emma on the floor. These weren't athletic achievements by most standards, but to me, they represented freedom. One of the most important lessons I learned was that consistency mattered far more than intensity. This was particularly true for managing my arthritis pain. In my younger days as a PE teacher, I emphasized the no pain, no gain philosophy. But for chronic pain management, especially in older adults, that approach can be disastrous. I discovered that gentle, daily movement produced far better results than occasional intense sessions followed by days of recovery. I committed to doing some form of stretching every single day, even if it was just for 5 minutes. Some days I felt energetic and could do more. Other days, when my pain was flaring, I scaled back but never skipped entirely. This consistent approach allowed my body to adapt gradually. My joints began to expect movement rather than fear it. My muscles slowly strengthened without being traumatized. After 3 months of this consistent practice, something remarkable happened. I realized one evening that I hadn't thought about my pain all day. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared completely. It was that it had receded enough that it no longer dominated my awareness. For someone who had structured their entire life around pain management, this mental freedom was as valuable as the physical improvement. Once I had established a consistent stretching routine, I realized I needed to address another critical component: strength. Without adequate muscle support, my joints would remain vulnerable. But traditional strength training felt intimidating and potentially harmful. I didn't want to lift weights that might stress my joints or require movements that could cause pain. So I developed what I call functional strength exercises, movements that mimicked everyday activities but provided enough resistance to build muscle. For example, instead of traditional squats, I practiced what I call sit-to-stands. I'd sit in a chair, then use my leg muscles to stand up slowly, focusing on keeping my knees tracking over my toes. Then I'd slowly lower back down, controlling the movement. I started with just 5 repetitions and gradually built up to 15. For arm strength, I used everyday objects like soup cans or water bottles. I'd do gentle bicep curls while watching the news, or overhead presses while waiting for the kettle to boil. These functional exercises helped me build the strength I needed for real-life activities. After about 2 months of incorporating these movements, I could carry my own groceries from the car without help. I could lift my youngest grandchild. I could push myself up from the garden without pain. The beauty of these exercises was that they served a clear purpose in my daily life. I wasn't building strength for its own sake. I was building it to support my independence and joy. As my physical abilities improved, I noticed something unexpected happening. My mental attitude toward pain was changing too. This led to my next breakthrough, understanding the powerful connection between mind and body in pain management. I began incorporating simple breathing techniques into my stretching routines. Before starting any movement, I'd take 3 deep breaths, imagining oxygen flowing into the tight or painful areas. During stretches, I focused on breathing into resistance rather than fighting against it. I also became more mindful of the language I used about my body, both when talking to others and in my own thoughts. Instead of saying my bad knee or my terrible back, I started using phrases like my healing knee or my strengthening back. This subtle shift helped me see my body as adaptive and resilient rather than broken. Another practice that helped was body scanning, a simple technique where I'd mentally check in with different parts of my body without judgment. This helped me distinguish between harmful pain and the discomfort of healing tissues being worked. These mind-body practices didn't eliminate pain directly, but they changed my relationship with it. Pain became information rather than an enemy. It became a sensation that could come and go rather than a permanent identity. 6 months into my journey, I had a profound realization during my morning stretches. For decades, I had been at war with my aging body, resenting its limitations and changes. Now, I was finally making peace with it, appreciating what it could do rather than focusing on what it couldn't. As my movement practice evolved, I realized the importance of my environment in supporting, or hindering, my progress. This led to my final breakthrough, designing my living space to encourage movement throughout the day. I placed a yoga mat in front of the television, making it easy to stretch during commercials. I put resistance bands in a basket next to my favorite reading chair. I even created what I call movement stations around my house, places with visual reminders to do a quick stretch or strengthening exercise. For example, by the kitchen sink, I posted a small note reminding me to do 10 calf raises while washing dishes. Next to the bathroom mirror, another note suggested gentle neck stretches while brushing my teeth. I also made sure my home supported safety in movement. I removed throw rugs that could cause tripping. I installed grab bars in strategic locations. I rearranged furniture to create clear pathways. These environmental changes made movement a natural part of my day, rather than a separate activity I had to make time for. They integrated physical well-being into my existing routines, rather than adding one more thing to my to-do list. The results were remarkable. Within 8 months of starting this journey, I was moving more throughout the day than I had in the previous 5 years combined. And because these movements were gentle and integrated, they didn't trigger pain flares or exhaustion. It's been 3 years since that heartbreaking moment when I couldn't get down on the floor to play with my granddaughter. Last week, Emma and I spent an hour building a fort under the dining room table, and afterward, I got up without a second thought. At 73, I'm not pain-free every day. There are still mornings when my joints remind me of their age, But now I have tools to address the discomfort before it becomes debilitating. I have a relationship with my body based on cooperation rather than conflict. The simple stretches and movements I've shared today aren't magical or revolutionary. They don't require special equipment or extraordinary flexibility. What makes them powerful is their gentleness, their respect for where you are right now, and their consistency. If you're struggling with chronic pain, especially as you age, I hope my story gives you hope. I hope it reminds you that while we can't turn back the clock, we can adapt and thrive within our current circumstances. Start small. Perhaps begin with just the morning mobilization I described. Do it daily for 2 weeks and notice any changes. Be patient with yourself. Remember that healing isn't linear. You'll have good days and challenging ones. Most importantly, believe that change is possible. Even at 70, even at 80 or beyond. Our bodies are remarkably adaptive at any age. They respond to how we treat them, and gentle, consistent movement is one of the kindest things we can offer them. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found this helpful, please consider subscribing to this channel for more content on stress-free living and managing health challenges as we age. And if you know someone who might benefit from these gentle approaches to chronic pain, please share this video with them. Remember, the journey to less pain doesn't have to be painful itself. Small, gentle steps can lead to remarkable changes. I'm living proof of that, and you can be too. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.